All right, we're back with Mike Sielski talking about his book that just came out. You can get on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore, The Rise of Kobe. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So, I know I didn't say the full title, right? Is it Rise of Kobe?
It's called The Rise, Kobe Bryant and the Pursuit of Immortality.
Pursuit of Immortality. Well, he definitely achieved that. Before we get into anything, I don't know if you know who Michael Franzese is. He's like a mobster guy. And when I was doing dishes and a Vlad interview was on, and it turns to Michael Franzese, and this is like an hour ago, like an hour before we got on the air. And apparently Michael Franzese used to be so, I might be saying his name wrong, used to be so rich in the mafia they had a helicopter. This interview is from 2016. I'm sitting there, I just watched an 11-minute clip on YouTube of Kobe's high school championship game. And at the end of this Michael Franzese interview, Vlad says, you had a helicopter at one time. And the guy's like, yeah, whatever. And Vlad's like, I've never heard of anybody that had a helicopter. And then Michael Franzese's like, oh, well, I think Kobe Bryant does. And then Vlad was like, man, if anybody needed one, it was him. And it was just so surreal, you know.
Oh man!
And given that I'm about to talk to you and everything, like right when this book's about to be released, and I guess that's just a reminder that, you know, going backwards, going forwards, that Kobe just made such an impact and just so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million things that can come into somebody's mind and can make you think of Kobe Bryant, right? And that's part of the reason that everybody was so shocked and so saddened by his death. It wasn't just that he was an incredible athlete and he was famous and he had won 5 championships and was a Hall of Famer. It was that everybody presumed that there was more ahead for him. What else was he going to do next? He was only 41. He had this amazing basketball career. Then he decided to become a writer and a filmmaker, and he was a girl dad, and he was involved in Gianna's basketball career. And, you know, he'd become kind of this counselor to all these NBA players who were now going to him for advice, and he was willing to give it. And there was just so much to the guy in these later years, and now that's all gone. And I think the fact that we're hoping and expecting so much more from him, and we'll never see what else he could have been, is part of what makes his death so tragic and so sad.
And poignant, much like the pandemic. I think a lot of that, you know, reminded us a lot of our own mortality.
I think you're 100% right, Mark. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I hate to be such a bummer, but you know,
hey, it's tough stuff, man. It is.
It is. A lot of the Kobe story is tough, but what made you decide to write a book about the beginning? Like what was the genesis of that? I understand that a gentleman was going to write a book, and it didn't quite get the advance he wanted, so it got shelved, and he had a treasure trove of tapes. It seems like quite a story.
Yeah, I'll try to make a really long story short. So back in the mid to late 90s, this guy, Jeremy Treatman, who was an assistant coach at Lower Merion, Kobe's high school, and it was kind of a friend and confidant of Kobe. They're going to collaborate on this book. It's going to be Kobe's kind of autobiography right as he's entering the NBA. Jeremy sits down with him for a bunch of interviews on these micro cassette tapes, and Jeremy transcribes some of the interviews, but not all of them. And the book project gets scuttled because Kobe takes off like a rocket, and Jeremy can't sell the book, and just one thing leads to another. It never happens. So I've known Jeremy for 25 years. So fast forward to, you know, a couple months after Kobe's death, I'm talking to Kobe's high school coach for a piece I'm writing with him for the Inquirer, for the Philadelphia Inquirer, where I work. I think to myself, you know, everybody in the Philadelphia area knows Kobe's origin story, but very few people in LA and around the country and around the world really know it very well. So I got the idea to try to write a book about just that, like to kind of do Batman Begins for the Black Mamba. Gotcha. And so I got Greg Downer, Kobe's high school coach, involved, and I got this guy, Jeremy Treatman, involved. And once I did, that took off. I could find other people to talk to. They put me in touch with other people, and one thing led to another, and I could do all these interviews and do this research. And then like 6 months, maybe 9 months into the research, Jeremy finds the micro cassettes of his old interviews with Kobe that nobody's heard in 25 years. And 3 days before Christmas, I go over to his house and we both have our masks on against COVID. And he hands me these tapes and I sit down and spend the next couple months listening to them and weaving them into the book. And I build a podcast around them. And so that's it. And so I hope in reading the book and in listening to the podcast, that people hear Kobe in a way they've never heard him before.
Man, that must have been surreal. You know, since most of my stuff is music related, and since you brought the podcast up, which I was later, who did the theme song?
Oh, it's great. It's Grover Brahms. Hold on, I'm going to find it right here. I have it downloaded on my music library. Yeah, Create Yourself. Grover Brahms featuring Justin Starling, and it's tremendous. I just love it.
Did you just license it, or is this somebody you know?
No, it was done through the podcasting company. Diversion Podcasts is the company I've worked with to produce this thing, and they found they had the music people at their fingertips, and I don't know what went into it. All I did was I showed up in a meeting like this, like the Zoom meeting we're having now, and they said, "We've got our theme song," and they forwarded it to me, and I listened to it, and I thought it was great.
See if I can hum down. I'd like to have him on the show. So
yeah.
since we're talking about the podcast, you know, one of the most interesting episodes was the one that went over Kobe's dad, Joe Jellybean Bryant. Did you ever see him play?
I didn't see him play, no, but we went to the same university. Joe went to LaSalle and I went to LaSalle, and I knew Joe a little bit. I'd met him in the mid 90s when he was an assistant coach at LaSalle, and I was a student there at the time. You know, so I was there. I was at LaSalle at the time where we all thought, oh my gosh, LaSalle's going to get Kobe. Kobe's going to come here. He's going to come play for his dad. Isn't this going to be great? And of course, it never came to be. It was a possibility for a brief period, but it never really was going to happen. And so I never got to see Joe play. He was ahead of my time, but I've seen video of him, and he was so talented, man. There's one clip of him going around where he drives baseline and dunks on Kareem, and it's just like, oh my God, like you don't see anybody do that to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but Joe Bryant could.
Did you have one of those Skybox or NBA Hoops Lionel Simmons cards when you was at LaSalle?
I did. I met Train, great guy. Grew up watching him. I grew up watching those LaSalle teams from the late 80s. You know, they were the East Coast answer to those Loyola Marymount teams out west, which were shooting threes a ton and just fun to watch.
Oh yeah, you know, I know about it. Remember, I asked you if you'd ever heard anything about Kobe meeting Hank Gathers and Bo Kimball.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, those were, I mean, great names in the past, both of those guys, Hank and Bo. Gosh.
You know, a moment in my life that made me start, one of the first moments that started to make me feel old, you know, Kobe was the first player to go in the NBA that I was older than.
That's, you know, it's funny to research his life back then. He's an old soul at the time. He really is. In some ways, he's much older than, you know, when he's 17, 18, 19, he seems much older. And in some ways, he seems much younger. And not quite, he's got growing to do yet, especially in like his relationships with other people. But in some ways, he was so much smarter than everybody else in a lot of respects. It was really cool to be able to dig back and look at him at that time period.
You know, that's an excellent segue, because I like to consider myself a connoisseur of words. And much like Kobe, I'm not gonna say I was smarter than the people I was around, but in a while, I was somewhat of a fish out of water, especially with like all the reading I do. And you know, I don't want to sound vain or conceited, but I rarely come across a word that I haven't heard before. And in your book, I came across two. So if I say them, I want to thank you for that. I love learning new words.
Oh, cool.
So if I say them wrong, please correct me, because, you know, I used to embarrass myself. I learned when I was younger, I'd see these words in books and I pronounce them out loud totally wrong. And then I'd end up looking stupid trying to sound smart. So
don't worry about it.
So peripatetic.
Peripatetic, yes. It means he moves around from place to place, you know, a lot.
Oh yeah, I didn't just learn the word; I got the definition. You know what I mean?
Oh, cool. Sorry.
And my wife's a teacher, and she enjoyed it too. Like, you know, we can be nerdy as you want, but we like, man. I used to have vocabulary word toilet paper.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, they used to sell it Sharper Image before they sold the brand name to somebody. And then the other word was treacle, with cloying sentiment. Am I saying that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I never heard
Absolutely.
those before. So thank you for introducing that to me.
Thanks. No, I'm glad. I'm really glad you enjoyed the book, Mark. Thanks. I mean, that means a lot. You know, that's all I want. I want people who love basketball to enjoy it. I want people who only know Kobe Bryant as like the celebrity who they heard of once in a while. If they pick the book up, they'd be able to enjoy it too. That's what I hope.
I think they'll enjoy it because you did a real good job with keeping it informative, but maintaining the narrative. Like you didn't do too much. Like I know sometimes in basketball books they do way too much explaining the history of the town and the area that you're gonna lose like a basketball fan. They don't want 70
Right.
pages of the history of it, and then other things. The games that needed a lot of detail, you put the right amount in, and the other games might only merited a paragraph or two. And I
Yeah.
wasn't there to totally judge the events, but it seems like you did a good job of.
Thanks. Thanks.
And so,
Appreciate that.
I mean, again, like I'm not trying to have a mutual admiration society, but
Well, I appreciate it.
I appreciate like content like that to read. So back to Jelly Bean.
Mhm.
Why didn't he dispose of the cocaine at any point during the chase?
That's a really good question. I would have loved to have asked him that.
Because 2 vials ain't nothing.
Yeah,
And
I don't know.
it seems like the whole situation would have been a lot less serious. I mean, if nothing else, he was planning to ingest it at some point. Obviously, why not just swallow it?
Good question. He probably panicked. I mean, if you remember that scene in the book, the cops roll up on him and he just drives away, right? He's 21. He's clearly panicked. It's a bad situation for him. It's a different situation in 1976 when it happens than it would be in 1996 or 2016. You got to know Philly at the time with what's going on with the cops back then. It's just, and he's a year into the NBA and he feels like he's got everything to lose. So, I believe me, I tried to speak to Joe. I reached out to the Bryant family and I never heard back from them. But if I had had the chance to talk to Joe, that's definitely something I would have asked him about.
How different do you think his career would have been if he went to the Warriors? I looked up that roster. Man, that was some roster. I believe they finished either first in their division or first in the West in general.
They had just won the championship the year before, and then they drafted him. What probably would have been completely different,
I mean, the same thing could happen with the Sixers, though. He could have got buried on the bench, or they could have wanted him to go on the post.
Yeah. I mean, looking back on it now, I wonder if Joe wasn't, poorly served by not staying at LaSalle in college for one more year just to mature a little bit more.
Or he might have killed Rick Barry.
Yeah, that's that's true. But yeah, like he was kind of ahead of his time, right? Like they didn't know what to do with a guy like him. He's 6'9". He's kind of Magic-like before Magic rolls around, and in high school and college, they in the pros they want to put him in the post and play him down low, and he's not that kind of player. And it's just he was ahead of his time in a bad way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, born too early.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so I gave you all the compliments, so I do gotta give you one complaint about the book, but you might be able to redeem it for me.
Okay.
I almost had a panic attack when I saw John Nash's name in there as a longtime Wizards fan. I immediately started having like Mitch Richmond cold sweats and things of that nature. But from the way you spoke about him, and I was unaware of this, he's highly regarded in the Philadelphia basketball scene, huh?
He is. He was the director of the Big Five for a while, graduated from St. Joe's. And most of that comes from John's character, right? Like, you can say what you want about his record as an executive. But just in terms of dealing with him straight up as a person, I've never encountered anybody who, thought he was a bad guy or anything like that. And that scene late in the book where you're talking about how he's working with the Nets at the time, and the Nets have Calipari, and they're weighing whether to take Kobe, and Kobe and Arntelem got to kind of throw him a head fake to get him not to take Kobe so Kobe can end up with the Lakers. Like that to me was fascinating. Yeah. And so I just, it was cool for me to talk to John about that. He remembers that time really well. And so, I mean, in terms of like who he is as a person, he's beyond reproach. In terms of his career as an executive, that's, we can debate that or discuss that another day.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's funny you say that. I'd like to close this out with a little bit of debate. I want to hear your opinions on what may or may not be considered some hot takes.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie to you. While I truly respect and appreciate Kobe Bryant's greatness and enjoyed watching him play sometimes. I was not a very big fan of Kobe Bryant.
Okay.
I definitely would never have wanted to be on his team. Actually, before we get into a hot take, I got one question.
Sure.
A lot of his teammates have had struggled with personal issues. And do you think that Kobe Bryant's, let's not say toxicity or anything of that nature, but let's say unrelenting nature might have contributed to some of that?
Oh, absolutely. And that was there when he was in high school. I get into it in the book, right? The Lower Merion Aces were 4-20 Kobe's freshman year. And part of the reason they were 4-20 was because he was shooting the ball too damn much. And the other guys on the team didn't like it. They just didn't. And some of them thought about transferring. But he got so much better than them that the team got better as a byproduct of it. And of course, you see that throughout his career. You know, couldn't get along with Shaq, who's the alpha dog. You know, how many teammates did he...
I'm more talking about stuff like, you know, do you think being around him might have negative impacts on like people like, you know, people that struggle with mental health issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
He like Lamar Odom, Kwame Bryant. Kwame Brown, you know.
Brown. He could be cold. He could be cutting. You know, go read, if you haven't already, Three Ring Circus by Jeff Pearlman, which really gets into Kobe's career during his prime with the Lakers, right? I mean, it does not paint a flattering picture of Kobe Bryant. And you can see, that's why I kind of wanted to do the book the way I did it, was that you can see the seeds for a lot of that in who he is as a young man. Because he could be terrible to his teammates at times.
I mean, to his credit, towards the end of his career, he started becoming a mentor to younger players and, you know, the girl dad thing in the academy. So, you know, everybody deserves a chance to change. And since we're talking about that, you know, I never believed the Colorado stuff from day one because there wasn't enough smoke for there to be fire. That stuff doesn't just happen once.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, you don't gotta say anything. You got a more respected position or a more.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't know.
You don't know what happened.
I don't know what happened. I've read what I've read. I've read everything everybody else has read. I didn't have any special insight during the reporting of the book, mostly because I was talking to people who knew Kobe before that stage of his life. So, but there are, I mean, you read the book. There are some nuggets here and there where you kind of like see how he interacts with women and girls and things like that, and you know, it just gives you some insights into what his perspective was back then.
They seem to be very, very respectful. So here we come to the hot take parts.
Okay.
I think Kobe Bryant as a player was extremely, for an all-time great. I think in all sports that I'm aware of in my lifetime, he is the most overrated all-time great by far.
What makes you say that?
I don't even think I mean, he might be a top 15 player. I doubt it. I don't think there was any point that he was ever the best player in the NBA. From the moment he entered the NBA, I think you go Jordan, Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett went back and forth with it for a little bit. Kobe might have had it for a second, but I don't think so. And then Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and LeBron James go back and forth with it a little bit until LeBron James has it, until Steph Curry takes it from him, and then it's debatable.
Not even 08 to 2010?
I'm going to Tim Duncan.
Okay.
I think Tim Duncan's career is far superior in every metric. I would choose him 100 times out of 100. It seems like he would make my life more enjoyable.
Yeah, he would definitely. Yeah, no, I think you're right to a great degree. I think Duncan was a better teammate.
More MVPs, just as many titles. Better defensive player late in his career. Sacrifice for his team to win. Well, if Kobe had took, and I'm not saying anybody ever should take pay cuts, but it's still an undisputed fact that the San Antonio Spurs probably won some of those titles because Tim Duncan took pay cuts when he could have did the whole, I've been in this market, I deserve this thing.
Yeah, it's a heck of a debate to have. I mean, you're going to have people who come back at you about, I mean, I like Duncan a lot more than most people do. I think he's the Tom Brady of the NBA in a lot of respects. I think his leadership and his style of leadership allowed that franchise to be as good as it was for as long as it was. I would argue he had even more of an influence on the Spurs than Greg Popovich did.
For sure.
In terms of tone setting and leadership and getting buy-in and all of that. So
Greg
yeah, we
Popovich
can
can't
go.
Greg Popovich can't be Greg Popovich if Tim Duncan don't take the yelling.
Exactly.
All right, so
Yeah.
here's the one that's probably the most shakiest one. I believe that Dwayne Wade on the Heat title teams, except for the last year, was a better player than Kobe was on any of the Shaq title teams.
Ooh, that's interesting. Look at the 01 playoffs. Look at what Kobe did throughout those playoffs. He was pretty great.
He was
Through the 12-1 run.
not on defense like Dwayne Wade was, though.
He was a pretty great defensive player.
Not like Dwayne Wade was, though.
All right. To be continued at a later date.
Just give it some thought. But like I said, that's probably the shakiest ones. And then this is why, like, I hear people talking like he's a top 5, and I don't want to disparage the man. I said all this. I mean, I had an argument online with Killer Mike the first year I used Twitter about this. He was on the Kobe side. But I think historically, in no particular order, Jordan, LeBron, Kareem, Bill Russell, Tim Duncan, Magic, Wilt Chamberlain, Steph Curry, Dr. J, Shaq, Kevin Durant, Larry Bird, Jerry West, Kevin Garnett, Akeem Olajuwon, Moses Malone, Oscar Robertson, Meadowlark Lemon, and Marquise Haynes are all undoubtedly better than Kobe Bryant. It's not even debatable.
Wow. Yeah, a couple of them I might take an issue with. Maybe Garnett, I would take an issue with.
Kevin Garnett was the best player in the NBA at least 3 times during a span that I don't think Kobe Bryant ever was. I mean, it's not. I mean, think if Minnesota hadn't done that Joe Smith stuff, and he stayed there. Look at those numbers. They kill anything, advanced metrics or old school counting stats. They destroy any seasons Kobe's had, including the 81 point.
Yeah, I think it's as much a style thing with Kobe. I think it gets to the allure of him, like we talked about earlier, a player like him in AI, that there's a style thing there. I think that plays into Bird as well. As great as Bird was, there's this style thing with Bird, the way he played, the fact that he was white, those certain factors, you can't take that out of there. It's part of the reason I think Kareem
Why not?
up until
Why not?
Well, no. I'm not saying. I'm just saying that's part of what enhances somebody's legend and legacy. I think the reverse of it is true too. Like part of the reason that Kareem, up until the last couple of years, was as underrated as he was, is that he wasn't demonstrative. He wasn't. It's the skyhook. It's old school. Same thing with Duncan. Like he's the big fundamental. There's reasons that we attach ourselves from a cultural kind of popularity standpoint to certain athletes, and reasons why some of them recede into the background. And so with Kobe and AI, I think you're talking about 2 guys from a stylistic standpoint are very alluring and attractive. And when they play the way they do, it enhances the way we view them as players, whether statistically speaking or championship wise, they may not match up with somebody else.
So do you consider Kobe to be a top 10 player?
I'd put him right at the edge of the top 10, I think. Yeah. At the edge.
He's better than Shaq? Or not better than Shaq? Do you get him higher on the list?
It's hard to compare. I think in the totality of his career probably gives him the edge, but Shaq was a much more dominant player at his best. I mean, I covered that 01 finals. The guy the Sixers really could not stop was Shaquille O'Neal, and they had Dikembe Mutombo on that team. And it was just just get him the ball, and Mutombo's either going to foul him or he's going to get knocked over, and Shaq's going to dunk. And Shaquille O'Neal was the biggest difference between those 2 teams.
I mean, and there's a difference between most dominant and most skilled,
Yeah.
Because
right.
Many of these players, like obviously Kobe has more skill than them. I mean, not none of the Globetrotters or Steph. What do you think about Steph Curry versus Kobe? Again, you want to talk about cultural impact and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a guy in Steph who changed the game in a way Kobe did not. You're talking about a guy who changed the style of play in the NBA and changed the way the young people play the game now too, right? Like in the same way that Dr. J and Michael Jordan made everybody want to fly, Steph made everybody want to shoot from 25 feet.
Right.
And so, that is a factor in his favor. Yeah. I mean, I could definitely see you ranking Steph ahead of Kobe. Yeah.
I mean, a little less projection though. If it ended today, I wouldn't put Steph ahead of Kobe.
Probably not, but a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and again, it depends on what metric you're using. Are you using impact and influence on the sport? Are you using career longevity? Are you using career achievements? Are you using championships? Some kind of mixture of all of that. That's what makes debates like this fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'd like to close with this. What's something that didn't make it to the book that you would have liked to seen in there? Because I know everybody gets their editor cuts something. I've ghostwritten a few things in my day.
I had a fair bit more about Joe and Pam Bryant in the early parts of the book, and that was trimmed. I'd like that to see the light of day sometime, just because I think that's a really interesting aspect of Kobe's story, his upbringing, where he comes from, how that influenced him. That's in the book, but if I'd had more time, a couple of years to research and write it, that would have been something that would have, I think, been in the final draft. I couldn't do it now. And besides, the book's better for it in the way that it reads faster and it doesn't get bogged down. But some of that stuff was really, really interesting. And that's,
I'm kind of interested in finding out about, was it her brother or her cousin who went and played at Maryland with John Lucas?
I was a family friend, Mo Howard. It was one of Joe's good friends in high school. And Mo ran the summertime sessions in the summer of 1995 when Kobe was scrimmaging with the Sixers and Jerry Stackhouse and all those college and NBA guys at St. Joe's University when they were playing pickup and all that. So yeah, Mo played in the backcourt with John Lucas at Maryland.
Oh,
yeah.
Speaking about old school Maryland, in the book you said that Duke and Kentucky was something the greatest college basketball.
Greatest college game ever. Yeah.
What about Maryland and UCLA?
Great. Was it Maryland and NC State or Maryland and UCLA?
I'm talking about way back in the day when who was Maryland?
Tom Burleson.
See, I might be getting it's not. It was when
you're thinking of Houston and UCLA,
but it was at Cole Fieldhouse. That's why I'm getting it mixed
up. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there were some great games in the late 60s and early 70s. The game of the Astrodome between Houston and UCLA.
Or your Chris Jenkins game.
I don't know. The Duke Kentucky game that's pretty freaking great.
But a lot of it's like like I'm too young to have been around Led Zeppelin in their heyday, and I love Led Zeppelin, but not the way my dad loves Led Zeppelin.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I mean, that seemed like, man, there's never a better place to end it with Led Zeppelin. So
no, you got me, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. So please,
you play Kashmir as we go off this podcast.
Man, I ain't Joe Rogan. I don't got a Spotify contract. You can do that when you go on one of them ringer shows.
Okay, sounds good.
But just so I don't butcher, the book's available everywhere. Can you state the title, please?
Sure. It's The Rise, Kobe Bryant and the Pursuit of Immortality. It'll be in bookstores tomorrow, Tuesday, January 11th. You can go to theriseofkobebook.com and order it there from anywhere you want. And thanks. I hope people enjoy it.
One last thing. Is there anywhere they can get autographed copies? A lot of people like that sort of thing.
I'll be doing some signings in the Philly area. I'm going to be at the Philadelphia Free Library on Thursday night at 7:30. If you are familiar with Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is just north of Philadelphia, I'm going to the Doylestown Bookshop, noon on Saturday, January 15th. COVID's making things tough, but I'm going to try to do, as many in-person signings as I can. And I'll keep posting stuff on social media about all that too.
Well, Mike Sielski, thank you so much for your time, sir. We're going to be actually signing off when I record this time, but I really appreciate you joining the show. This has been informative. I loved your book, and I can't wait to read the next one. And every time I get past that paywall, I'll be reading you on the Inquirer too.
Thank you, Mark. This was a pleasure, man. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you very much. You have a good night.
You too.
What up, world? It's your boy Mark Walter Ward, Superfacts Show, Superfacts Network. Today we got with us upon the release of his outstanding new book, Rise of Kobe, longtime journalist, third-time author, Mike Sielski. How you doing today, sir?
Doing well, Mark. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Did I say your name right?
Sielski. Think of like an otter going down a hill. Sielski.
Sielski, got you. All right, so I really just wanted to go over your career. I like to think maybe I could have made a halfway decent journalist. So I'm always interested in it. When did you first know that you had a talent for writing, and after that, when did you know that it was something that you could do professionally?
Well, I did pretty well in writing in high school, and liked it, because it could help me get my assignments done, basically. I didn't think much more of it than that. When I went to college, I went to LaSalle University in Philadelphia. I knew I wanted to do something in sports media, but I didn't know what. Did I want to try to be a play-by-play guy? Did I want to write? Did I want to work for a team? Whatever. And I was writing for the student newspaper, and I discovered I loved writing. I loved the feel of covering a sporting event, mostly basketball, but any kind of sporting event. I loved the reaction that I got from people when they read my articles. I really liked that aspect of it. And I like the feeling of finishing an article or a book or a column or something like that. You feel like you accomplished something. There's an old saying like, I don't love writing, but I love having written. You love the feeling of being done with the process. And so that's when I got hooked in college and decided that I really wanted to write for the rest of my life.
Well, just out of curiosity, this is out of the blue. Have you ever heard of The War of Art?
I have not.
It's a book. I forgot the author's name. It's terrible, but he believes that writing, you should treat it as if there's an actual living muse, whether you believe that or not, and you should treat it absolutely like a profession. And he schedules a time every day that whether he has something to write or not, he sits down and he sits there and writes. And I think his name's Stephen Pinkerfield or Stephen Prescott.
Steven Pinker, maybe.
Yeah,
Could be.
It's the art of war, but it's a great way to help people get through procrastination, particularly in writing, but in creativity in general. So then, you find that you enjoy this at the student newspaper, and you over the years parlay that into a columnist. I grew up in the DC area, so to me, a columnist holds a special affinity from Christine Brennan, not Maury Povich, Shirley
Povich, yeah.
Shirley Povich, Michael Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser,
Yeah.
And then I know the Philadelphia Inquirer is a paper of quite notable repute, especially sports wise. So what was your journey to becoming a sports columnist for that, which must be a dream come true for somebody who likes to write about basketball?
It was a dream come true. My hero growing up was a guy named Bill Lyon, who had the job that I have now. And he mentored me, and we had a friendship, relationship for 25 years. Just a great man. And I took the path that it used to be the common thing to do back in the 80s and 90s, and it isn't so common anymore because media is so different. Right. But I got a job at my local newspaper covering Friday night high school football and, basketball in the wintertime and softball and baseball in the spring, and taking box scores over the phone for high school swimming and all of that stuff, and worked my way up from there.
When did you get the nod? Like how did you start doing a couple guest columns or?
Well, I got a full-time job at the Wall Street Journal in 2010. An editor I knew there got hired. They decided they wanted to cover sports more. And so they bulked up their sports section, bulked up their coverage of New York City, and they hired me to cover the New York Mets. And so I covered the Mets for a year. I covered the New York Jets for a year. I covered a lot of hockey. But I was in New York, and it was right in the thick of everything. Right. And that was great. And then after I was there for 3 years, the opening came up at the Inquirer to be a sports columnist. And they actually reached out to me and said, would you be interested in the job? And I jumped at it. I took it right away. It's the job I always wanted, my dream job. And I've been there ever since. That was the fall of 2013.
Okay. So you didn't cover the Eagles during TO or anything then, huh?
I did. I was a columnist for a few newspapers in the suburbs around Philly. Basically the same job I have now, except at a smaller place. And I was at that Super Bowl when TO played on the broken ankle against the Patriots. I covered the whole thing in 04 and 05 where he, the helicopters were following him and he was doing the sit-ups in his driveway and all of that. It was a crazy time, but it was a lot of fun to cover, man. It was always something to write when TO was around.
Do you think TO gets a fair shake? How it's perceived?
It's funny you say that. I was the first writer in Philly after that whole contract situation came out where he wanted a new contract from the Eagles after playing so well in the Super Bowl. I was the first writer to defend him and say the Eagles should absolutely give him a new contract. And if anybody else on the team complains, tell them the next time you have 9 catches on a broken ankle in the Super Bowl, you can renegotiate your contract too. And he's a great player. I think he's unpredictable. He can be, I've seen numerous sides of him. I did a one-on-one interview with him while he was in Philly, and he cried, he laughed, he was serious, he was joking, he was all kinds of stuff. But he's a great player, and it took him way too long to get inducted into the Hall of Fame. That was ridiculous.
I totally agree. So since we're speaking of memorable Philadelphia sports moments, were you at the infamous Derek Fisher step over game 1 of the NBA Finals?
I was not. No, I was not. I was covering the Sixers at the time, kind of on and off during that playoff run. I was not there to see AI step over Tyronn Lue. Although people remember that moment, like it's one of the 10 greatest moments in Philadelphia sports history, because that team, that Sixers team, just captured the city's imaginations and hearts because they played so hard. They played great defense. Allen was he was a fireworks show every night. And when he hit that shot and stepped over Lue like that, it was like a middle finger to the Lakers and to everybody who thought the Sixers didn't have a chance. And then the Lakers spent the next 4 games showing that the Sixers really didn't have a chance. Yeah. But it was fun nonetheless.
Hey, let me ask you this. A lot of people argue who the first point forward was. And you know how connectors become a popular term in basketball these days?
Yeah, sure.
I think that Aaron McKie was the first connector.
He would be up there, man. He was a terrific player for a long time, especially that 2000-2001 season. He was the 6th man of the year. He could do anything. He could shoot from the outside. He could defend. He was tough. He was smart. That's one of the all-time favorite Philly teams, that Sixers team. I mean, we were talking about it before we came on, right? You get the league MVP in AI, 6th man of the year in Aaron McKie, defensive player in the year Dikembe Mutombo, coach of the year in Larry Brown. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's quite a, I don't know, a triumvirate plus one. Is it like a quadumvirate?
A quadumvirate, something like that, yeah.
Got you. I ain't gonna hold you too much more about the career thing. Just out of curiosity, what was the most memorable game you attended?
Probably not basketball related. Well, I'll give you 2. I was at Super Bowl 52 when the Eagles beat the Patriots, with the Philly special with Nick Foles and all that. Oh, wow. But I also covered Villanova's winning the national championship game when Chris Jenkins hit the shot at the buzzer to beat Carolina.
I thought you was about to say 1985. I was about to ask
you. No, I ain't that old.
I was about to ask you for some skincare tips or something like that, brother.
I wasn't even 10 years old then. No, I'm thinking about 2016 when Ryan Arcidiacono dribbles the length of the floor, flips the ball to Chris Jenkins, and he bangs that one from the top of the key at the buzzer. That was really cool to cover.
Just a quick Q&A. Most charismatic athlete you've covered that played for a Philadelphia team?
Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson.
Not even any hesitation. Will Daryl Morey bring a title to the Philadelphia 76ers?
No.
Would you want to see James Harden become a Sixer?
Just because it would be interesting to cover, yeah.
Okay. Do you want Ben Simmons to remain with the team?
I don't care one way or another.
Me too, kind of, as long as he don't come to the Wizards. Did you know that Peter Vesey follows you on Twitter and he rarely follows any basketball-related people? Are you friends with Peter Vesey?
I had no idea that Peter followed me. I knew from about 4 years ago, I did a story about a guy named Michael Brooks, who was a great college player at my alma mater at LaSalle, and then had a incredible story kind of after that. He had an injury in the NBA, and I did this gigantic story about him. And I know Peter saw that and really liked the story, but that's it. I've never actually spoken to Peter face to face or over the phone or communicated with him at all. So I appreciate everybody who follows me. And if he does, that's awesome.
I felt the world suffered a loss when he stopped covering TV. I used to love listening to him on NBC. But
yeah, he was part of the 90s NBA, right? I mean, that was it, with whether it was Jordan or the Knicks or the Rockets back then. I mean, the theme music on the NBA on NBC, it was all part of the tapestry.
And the great nicknames, man. I miss the nicknames. Like now you gotta give yourself a nickname, or the nicknames are just all like abbreviations, like C Webb.
Mm-hmm. No, you're exactly right. He was very creative with that.
All right, well there we go. Mike Sielski, like an otter on a mountain, talking about his career in journalism. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
All right, we're back with Mike Sielski to talk a little bit about his time covering Allen Iverson for various publications in and near the Philadelphia area. You know, I actually had the pleasure when he first got released. I'm from the DC area. I saw him play and actually got to play against him in some of those summer league games in the Jabbo Kenner League. And I saw his first game against Fort Hood, the exhibition game in McDonough. And I can tell you, I've never seen a city so electrified as it was the news when Allen Iverson came. And he's just truly a singular athlete in the history of sports.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. He was so much fun to cover. He was interesting every time you were around him, no matter what was going on. You know, so smart, like not given enough credit for how just a smart individual he was, naturally intelligent. And just that like it was, his time in Philly was so weird because I think people thought that he could be better than he was, right? Like, why isn't he working out more, right? Why isn't he practicing, you know, the whole practice ran, all that stuff. But you watched him on the court and it was like, I can't believe I'm watching this guy do this, knowing that he just showed up at the arena after like having dinner at 5:30 at a Houlihan's on City Avenue or something like that, that he just rolled into the arena, put his sneakers on and dropped 39 on the Pistons in the playoffs. It was amazing. And he was the best to cover. He really was. You know, whether things were going well or things were not going well, it was all action all the time with AI.
Well, with that being said, you just released your excellent debut basketball book, The Rise of Kobe. And I gotta say, it's definitely one of the best sports debuts I've ever read. And it's probably in my top short list of best basketball books I've read. Do you ever have plans of ever writing a book on Allen Iverson?
First, thanks for that. And to answer your question, probably no. A friend of mine named Kent Babb, who writes for the Washington Post.
I got it.
A few years ago, did a great book about Allen. Really revealing
The Answer, right?
No, it was the one that Larry Platt did, I think.
I got the Allen one. I could walk over there right now and get it, but I'd have to go off camera.
Yeah,
I definitely got that one.
The one that Kent did is called Not a Game. And it's all about Allen adjusting to life after basketball, and it's really good. And I couldn't do a book on Allen that would be better than the one he did. So I'm looking around for other topics, and we'll see what comes around. But I'm definitely interested in doing another basketball book.
Got you. Do you remember the first time you met Allen Iverson?
Yeah, I was in a press conference with him during the 2000 playoffs when the Sixers were playing the Indiana Pacers in the second round. And I covered some of that series and talked to Allen in a press conference, like a lot of people. And then you know, the following years, you'd go to practice. He'd talk to him after a game. We'd all crowd around his locker. You know, just became. I was one of the scenery, you know, to him. You know, one of the dozen or so, or even 24 people who were around him a lot during his time with the Sixers.
You know, do you think those people covered him fair, unfair, too fair? Because you know,
I think most of the people in Philly did cover him fairly. Now, there were some people who didn't, who were clearly out to get him a little bit. But I think most of the writers who were around him a lot, if you know the name Phil Jasner, for instance, from the Philadelphia Daily News, who was the longtime Sixers beat writer for the Daily News, he and Allen got along pretty well. They respected each other. Ashley Fox, who covered the Sixers for the Inquirer back then, you know, Stephen A. Smith, they were all very fair, I thought, to Allen. You had to report the not so great stuff, but you also wrote about the incredible stuff that he did on the court.
Got you. Who do you think's a better rapper, him or Kobe?
Oh, Allen, I think.
Did you ever sit near Ann Iverson during a game?
I did not. You could always find her, though. She was behind one of the baskets, and she was loud, and she was very proud of her son.
I mean, as she should have been.
Yeah, darn right.
What's a underrated, memorable moment? Like maybe he did like some incredible steal and dunk in like a meaningless February game, like just something you remember that was.
There's two. There's one. I was there the night he dropped 60 against the Orlando Magic, which was his career high, and that was incredible. And that was just a middling, you know, midseason game. But there's a game against the Wizards where they beat the Wizards at the end. The game was tied. The Wizards are inbounding the ball. with a chance to win the game with like 3 seconds left, and Allen steals the inbounds pass and goes the length of the floor. And it's just something that you don't really even think of in situations like that. You would just assume the team that's inbounding the ball is going to get the last shot. And I'm looking at you now, and you look bummed out by this. You either lost money on this game, or you're a Wizards fan, or something.
I'm a huge Wizards fan. I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I'm sorry to bring up such a painful memory, Mark.
It's always against the Wizards. I thought the only thing worse if you could be like, well, I remember this one time he crossed Antonio Daniels so bad he fell.
Oh no! If we're going to talk crossovers, you got to talk about the one against Jordan in Allen's rookie year. I mean, that once he did that, everybody knew, oh my gosh, we've got something special with this kid.
You remember Al Dillard on Arkansas?
Yeah, I remember the name. Yeah.
Man, his first game against Arkansas, I can't remember homeboy's name, but he took like Al Dillard's place as like the little shooter off the bench, and it was Allen Iverson's very first game that counted, and man, he crossed dudes so ridiculously. You want to know how audacious Allen Iverson was? His first game against the defending champs, they still got Corliss Williamson, and it's a 40 minutes of hell and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
He blocks a dude on, I can't remember who it was, but he blocked somebody on Arkansas shot, pinned it to the backboard, one hand, came down with it, and turned around and tried to throw a full court bounce pass to a cutter. It got stolen at half court. And this is like, I swear, in like the first 50 seconds of the game. Go back and watch the tape.
It's funny. We're talking about Allen. We're talking about Kobe. And it's one of the things that I miss about the NBA now, because analytics are great. Analytics help you understand the game better. But analytics do take some of the soul and the creativity out of the game. And you watch a guy like Allen, or you watch a guy like Kobe, who are taking and making shots that coaches nowadays would say, don't shoot that. That's a bad shot. That's a long two, or that's too early. But yet it was so freaking entertaining to watch them play that something's missing in the game if you can't have guys like that.
Oh, bro, they went from a jazz to an orchestra. It's the
exactly.
homogenization of it,
Yep, absolutely.
And then finally about Allen Iverson, do you think he's found peace?
I hope he has. I don't know. But I hope he has.
I mean, I know you got your ear turned to the grapevine, and I don't want to hear any bad news, but by all accounts, it seems like he's been doing much better the last.
Yeah, it does. It does.
And for a long time,
Yeah, I hope it stays that way for his sake. I really do. There's something about Allen, no matter what he does, that there's something about him that makes you want the best for him. And you hope that that's what comes of his life.
When in around, let's say, like 94 to 98, I used to use my barometer on whether I thought a person was a good person or not on their opinion of Allen Iverson's character. That would tell me a lot.
Yeah. I mean, he's fascinating. He could be the subject of psychological and sociological studies from now till the end of time.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for your time talking about AI. That'll be a pleasure for the rest of my life. Thanks for the insight.
Sure.